This is IBM Museum. Here I am in front of the NCR 3433 that is running Windows NT, and not really much about IBM here, but I want to run a program that I found on there. Kind of give some neat results and reinforces something I've said on prior videos, and I'll cover that at the appropriate time. Now, some of the sections of this program can run a little bit slow. I will pause for those portions and then re-enable the recording once it gets the results from this program. But let me show you what I'm referring to. And I'm going to face the display I have in the background just because I don't want any lag to this. Now, the program I'm referring to is the System Information, and I guess that's probably the start of the name of this program. I read it as SiSoft Sandra 2001 TE for Windows 32. Let me see if I can pull down the help menu here first, because the I is lowercase, so I mean that's why I'm pronouncing it that way. Now, I've checked on these links and they are not able to display any pages. I haven't searched around for anything more intently in a browser just to find out if this exists somewhere. But by some animations here, I mean, this is 20 years old when the copyright is listed. And maybe searching for information on the author or something else would give more detail. And I do see a UK domain, meaning that this person, and maybe she's named Sandra, is in the UK, in the United Kingdom. So the first icon of this is add new module. I haven't tried really adding any module to these. I've gone through and checked out a little bit as far as the system summary and the mainboard information just lock the system up. And this is probably intended for a newer computer than this NCR. The first thing I saw was that the CPU and BIOS information seems to give, results back very quick. And that's why I really want to get in talking about this, because it's interesting that it's rating this processor at 110 megahertz. And when I was inside the system, I mean, physically it looks to be just a standard Intel 46DX2 66 megahertz. I don't know why it's rating that as being higher speed. I don't think it's overclocked by that much, but it does give information. I mean, that CPU, as we looked inside on the previous video, didn't even have a heatsink or a fan on it for cooling, and the airflow of this machine is not even directed down that way. It might be handy for me to go through and do a temperature check with my infrared temperature gun sometime, just to kind of see. And it's going to be a challenge from there, because I would I had to look under that drive cage and maybe to power off the system and quickly get in there and check the temperature. But I mean, it's providing valid information otherwise. The multiplier, I don't know why that's saying just as a 1x. I mean, it's clock multiplied internally. It's rating the generation as it, being a 46 CPU. I don't really know typically refer to 46, the difference from 386 being the class of CPU, not necessarily a generation, but maybe that's fine. So the model information, I mean, that's right on. So it's a 5-volt CPU, standard 46 DX2 from Intel, and the revision stepping is the CPU ID that I make sense out of is 0435, meaning that the 3 means a 46 DX2 CPU, and the 5 is the stepping value. So that stepping mask, and I would have to look at my chart and go through and compare otherwise to the information I have about that. That stepping is probably right, and indeed it's 8 kilobyte of right through cache that's on there. The coprocessor built in, virtual mode extensions, and of course the things that came along with later CPUs between the 46 and that time frame of 2001, when this program seems to be designed around. Of course, all those are marked no as far as a lot of things. MMX technology, SSE, SSE2, all that later, even the 64-bit extensions. And so this could even be run on, a later CPU to see what results. And I just have to see if there's and of course I want to observe copyrights, and they really mark out that it's about not, copying the program in violation of the copyright data. And these performance tips, I mean, CPU is slow. Windows runs optimally on 5x86, and just kind of interesting there. And then this drop-down list goes for the system BIOS, which is valid data there. System BIOS is old. Check for an update. And gives you some information about the BIOS, and of course this being an older BIOS version, and these tips, we'd have to see if what that would do. Now normally at the bottom, and there are options you can go through and check certain things. I could even go through and go through and uncheck the inappropriate things there. But that's the options. You have I guess the refresh goes through and refresh the data that's currently displayed. Now the back and next, those are the things that shuffle through those modules. And I don't necessarily want to do that to advance to the next module. I want to go through and evaluate it from that main screen that accessed in control panel, because some of these they're just not relevant to the system. Some even go through and lock it up. Others just provide no information at all. For instance, that PCI AGP, and it even identifies PCI interface version 2.10. Well, this system is microchannel. It doesn't have a PCI bus. And these drop-down lists, they don't give any other information. So that might be interesting running on a PCI system. Video system information. And that gives some relevant data for the video adapter. That's at NCR, and that's on the planer itself. The 77C22 chip that does the video, and what the current color mode is, and supported Windows version. I don't know what they mean by that, version 64. And supported video modes, so I could go through. This is in 640 by 480 256 colors. I could go into an 800 by 600 with 256 colors at a slower refresh rate, 56 hertz. So it looks like the higher resolutions would be slower refresh rates, of course, even though it's the same color depth. And just gives some of the information. Now, this is how it's detecting this modern day display. And it's not a 13 by 9 screen. It'd be interesting for the, it has a recommended monitor size. It would be, I guess that for the resolution is probably what it's rating for that. And, you know, it's probably going to have some tip telling me at the bottom about the video. So, I mean, these are interesting for the supports Windows 2.x. I mean, a lot of information, that some pretty good programming to get that information gleaned from the video driver. Use true color for video playback. Refresh rate of at least 75 hertz is recommended. Turn off Windows animation to reduce delays. Well, Windows animation doesn't have any Windows animation at this level of Windows NT 4.0. So, and that's the only device there. Windows memory information, and of course it reports the total physical memory of 128 megabytes, and then how Windows goes through and virtualizes that space as well. So maximum page file is 243 megabyte, and the free page file is, you know, 88%. So, and then it has little sliders there. It doesn't even have any marks as far as the indicating how much quantity those are in those graphs. And it's really strange for the total memory being 371 megabyte and the total physical memory being 128. There's not much of a granularity between those. I want to find out if the options are context sensitive, and it looks like they are. So you can go through for those options on each one of those modules to fine tune, as it were. And this is a system that has 2 SCSI hard drives on it, and gives information there on the drive. This drive 1, and that's a 2 gigabyte drive. Even has about the diskette drive. Okay, and the second hard drive is also 2 gigabytes. And shows the space used, how many files, how many folders, etc., etc. And I guess the graphs show the free space on whatever selection. Okay. And just warning me that I don't have a diskette in the drive currently. Okay. Ports information. And this has for the COM1. And normally programs would go through and report the UART, whether it's an 8250, whether it's a 16550, you know, if it has that FIFO buffer, what level that the UART is, a little bit more information than what this provides. And that can be limited by Windows NT going through and blocking that port access too. Not having that hardware abstraction layer, that HAL, and not letting you bang on the hardware directly. Okay. And lastly, the parallel port. Okay, keyboard information. And a lot about the keyboard driver. It's funny that it identifies it as a PC-AT keyboard with 84 keys. Type and subtype. And I don't know if it's necessarily reading the keyboard ID. I think that's an 834. I'm trying to remember the standard keyboard ID in hex. Filter keys, sticky keys. And that's a lot of the functions of the driver, more so than the keyboard. Mouse information. It's a Microsoft PS2 port mouse connected to port PS2 or USB. Well, it's connected to the PS2 port. No wheel supported buttons, and that's a standard. You know, I just have that standard soap bar IBM mouse connected to a NCR system. I mean, maybe that's the IBM portion of the besides my cap of the video, and has the tracking speed, double click speed, all that's in the interface of the mouse driver, of course. Mouse of the wheel is recommended for better whatever. So, you know, I mean, this mouse works. Printer and fax information. Could not open printer because I don't have anything connected to the printer port. There's not any printer stuff. And there's going to be things like this MCI Devices Information. It's got, I mean, I don't even have a CD or a sound card on this computer. But it has listings for that, and clearly, you know, newer computer sequencer. I don't know if they're referring to MIDI. Yeah, MIDI sequencer. And so this might even be interesting to run on something like my ThinkCenter, my S51 that I use as my tweener system. I had that up earlier, was copying EEPROMs and connecting scanners to it. So values of that video and audio on the system. Windows information gives all the information on this, on the Windows version, and session. And I guess it's logs onto that administrator account automatically. And time since Windows startup. I didn't even know that. I guess I probably knew that Windows NT would track values like that, but it's not a debug version. No security present. Remote terminal session, no. And the enhancement pack, it's interesting that IE 5 and 6.0 boot type normal OS folders gives all the information. Consider upgrading to Windows 2000. Okay. Okay. The Windsock information locks up the system. And really, a lot of time, the Windsock information, that was relating to older. Well, I mean, I haven't heard Windsock used when they got into anything above, well, I guess Windows 95 and Windows 98, and XP there's a Windsock fix for it. So I guess it's still valid, but in this instance, it locks up the system. And I'm, with an Ethernet card on there, 100 megabit per second. For some of these, like the Olay information, that's object linking and embedding. It's going to give some information as far as here it's the bitmaps and what applications handle that. Image document, media clip, MIDI sequence, sound under the Olay 2, video clip, or WordPad document. So it just shows what applications are set to that and some other details. I'm gleaning on those Windows internals of the system. I'm trying to think DirectX, if that I guess it gives results. And it has a lot of, side selections, sub selections, based on what the video is able to do for this level and this operating system. So the DirectX version is old. It doesn't have any fog support or alpha blending support, whatever those mean. Now, network information, that was one of the things that took some time, I think. Either that or the IP network information. And I'm not worried about giving out the network information that this does. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to pause the video because it does take between 5 and 10 minutes for results here. Okay, and that actually came back fairly quick. In Windows NT 4.0, running, it's 32-bit, and some of the things in there. And I mean, I have extra protocols, NetBIOS and IPX, SPX. I don't need that stuff in this environment, but could get details, about those. SCSI information, and I was thinking for this SCSI chipset, this is probably just designed for certain. Okay. So and maybe that's true that it doesn't. I don't have any SCSI devices connected up to this, and I could go through and I've got the scanners I was connected up to Windows XP just a moment ago that were SCSI interface. The cables would work, but really, that might be something for later. I'm just going through and showing what modules are displaying information. It might be good at a later point just to kind of see what that refers to, or what information on the device it's able to show. Here's all the fonts, and I expect that there's a zillion of these that I would not really go through and show any of those details, of course, but they show the information on the fonts. And I guess it's probably the relative true type fonts that are on there. Now, the IP network information, that's another thing that it takes a period of time. I'm going to pause the video, and that's going to probably take the 10 minutes. Okay, finally came back with some results. And this is probably depending on the subnet that it has to scan, and going through all the ports, you know, what it's viewing as open ports on the network. And I don't even know if it's going to really rate these as what it's detecting as being, it calls them workstations. I mean, these are devices that are on the network. And I would have to look through just to kind of see what some of these devices. This might even be handy for something that is a device on my network and determining what ports are open or something else. And I don't have an intrusion prevention device or anything like that. That if I were to do this, and I think I had my Cobalt servers that would go through, and they would notify me by email if they saw port scans occur on the internal network. And that's kind of handy things to know sometimes. I mean, to know whether someone's what someone's trying to do, but really just some basic network values. I don't know if it was all worth all the wait for going through that at my end. Probably took close to 8 minutes or so to give me any results. CMOS information. And I got a laugh out of this, of course. It's Sunday, March 7th of 9621. We are in some Star Trek time now. Or even beyond. It'd be some kind of star date. And that 96 for the value of the century. And of course, I can explain what that is in a little bit of time here. But just some other information on the CMOS. And some of this is even relevant to more older operating systems, not necessarily to something that's more newer in this case, but just that date being so much out of place is what I wanted to comment on now. The OpenGL video information. And that's probably just relating to the Windows NT. Services information. There's probably a ton of services in the Windows NT environment that are on the system, whether they're running. But just insight, you can get this information out of your services and control panel anyway, for all that information. And it's so data sources information, no data sources set up, so that's not even relevant on this level. CPU benchmark. Okay, and it's going to give us the same sort of wait and don't move your mouse and don't press any key. I'll be back when it continues. Okay, and that's come back with information. Now it's got the information on this current CPU at 486DX2, 66 megahertz. And these reference CPUs, I mean, this is the sort of systems that would have been out when this software was probably designed and came out. I can go through and, in fact, we want to see, it looks like Athlon 4s and Pentium 4, 1.6 gigahertz. I mean, even the, probably the Pentium 4 that I have on my XP is after this software came out. It wouldn't know what to do with it. But I thought I'd go through and scale the reference systems down at that lower end of the chart because it does have entries for more relevant CPUs. And the last one we'll go through, and not the Pentium 120. Let's go to that AMD 5X86. And that's the kind of CPU that's in that other NCR system I have. So this is going through, even though it tests out at the same relative levels that reference CPU 1 being a 46 DX2 66 megahertz. I mean, that looks like it matches up very close. But I don't know why it's calling this, saying that this is operating at a 110 megahertz. And we see just as some of the comparisons of what they would be to those other reference CPUs. See, it's saying, yeah, 46, Intel 46DX2 at 109 megahertz. And that performance rating, and again, it's not supporting the instruction set like that SSE2 and we did that. Change benchmarks. Synthetic benchmark may not tally with a real quote. And so just some of these, and these tips again, and the CPU is slow. Windows runs optimally, but we have the results. I'm just shifting up that window to reach the bottom here. Okay, include extra, yeah. So we have the ability to change those options, being context sensitive again. I don't want to get CPU multimedia benchmarks. That's not relevant in this case. As to say, I don't even have a sound card or that sound card or the CD-ROM, anything like that. These benchmarks, drives and benchmarks and memory benchmarks, the only thing network benchmark, the only thing I've seen earlier is that I was just locking up the system because it's too old. And not necessarily, I guess, locking up the system. It's Windows NT 4. It has the ability to recover from an out-of-control program. And I was able to terminate that through Task Manager, but it just didn't give any relevant results. So here's the CMOS dump, and this is very informative for this. This is nice. We've seen that from the aspect of that UNPC program is able to do that. And the UNPC program, as we stepped out and stepped back in, it even enabled that microchannel extra non-volatile RAM storage. And I doubt if this does, for the primary reason I'll show in just a moment. So it just showed the values in those offset registers. It's non-volatile RAM. It's backed up by that battery. That battery we replaced in the previous video for this DS1387 real-time clock chip. That's the CMOS that it's referring to here. So this is handy seeing the values in some of these areas, and it's marking reserved for a lot of it that can really differ by system. But I want to get down here, and I've demonstrated this on prior videos, of going into there's the checksum values, and then we get down to offset 32 hex, and it's saying date century, and it's got that value of 96 hex in that register, the offset of 32 hex. That's what's causing that invalid date that we saw earlier. And being that this is, if we get down to looking at 37 hex, that has a value of 20 hex in that register. And it's marked as reserved here, but that's actually the century byte location. IBM moved it for the PS2 systems, just re-indexed it to being offset 37 hex instead. So this software is just basically reading that 32 hex offset and taking it as that's going to be the century byte location rather generically, because it's not accounting for the PS2s or the that aspect. It's not even testing the program apparently for the microchannel aspect either in that feature byte flags. We haven't seen any feature byte indication, and that was more relevant with older computers, not necessarily the computers that this program is checking. But if it would read the correct register at offset 37 hex, that would have the correct value for the century. And we can look down through. It does have the extended CMOS values, and some of those are filled in, and some of those, are going to be relevant to the system here. But I just thought I'd primarily show that 32 hex and 37 hex offset as being the reason for the error of the date. Now you have the ability, and I'm trying to remember even the Windows program that you could run, and that's more of like the Windows 3.1 era. You could run the program and display all your system INI, Win INI, boot INIs. I think boot INI is unique to later. I remember the system INI and Win INI primarily. And then also showed your autoexec.bat and your config.sys on those older systems. But that's just apparently a way of looking through and there's not much that's left in there with this level of Windows. But even the solitaire options equal 3, and that's probably even the times it rotates the deck, and you can go back 11 steps maybe. So there's some cheat codes, as you could, I guess, getting into that area that you could do for solitaire. Yeah, I did see the solitaire placed prominently on the desktop, and I mean, I played solitaire back in the day quite a bit, but so there's your, when the system boots, you have even choices to drop back in that VGA mode. I'm not as familiar as with the autoexec.nt. Probably the same. Just stating in there of, and mainly being filled with remark comments to say what exactly is going on or how the file is used. Environment variables. And that's more the processor identification has that x86 family 4 model 3 stepping 5. That's where I'm more familiar with that, and that has that on the fly CPU ID effectively here too, with that genuine Intel string. So that's how I'm used to those 486 things being presented. It's interesting, the next and the options and refresh, all that's grayed out. I'm not familiar with the what that burning wizard is. It's burn-in is you put together a computer and you have it run through a burn-in period to make sure it doesn't quit or doesn't, or if there are any errors come up with time, or if the system, you're checking on temperatures and things like that to see if it gets too hot. I'm not going to run through that. Prior to this, I didn't even check out what this is at that level. I wasn't really interested in that component. The web update wizard probably updates the program that the author did, and like I say, I didn't find any. This is probably just bottom out because I didn't find any relevant information online for that, or that the web stuff was just not up. Any information on the program, it being on a particular page, and I can search a little bit more in depth knowing the author name now. But maybe if anybody's ever heard of this software, encountered it in the past, comment on it. And I vaguely remember going over this program earlier, years and years ago, but didn't really remember too much detail. And the performance tune-up, I'm not going to get into that at all. That's going to be for a lot of the newer systems, and probably can tune up quite a bit more to the system than what this level of system is able to. And create a report wizard, I don't know if it goes through all the modules and basically writes down the information to for whoever's running it to know what their system is capable of. I guess we could go over just showing the menus. There's program options even. Module properties, listing modules, testing modules, information modules. What toolbars are shown. Showing all modules. You can even go through and rearrange the icons within this. And even apparently shortcuts to get to control panel or scan disk or the disk defragmenter, the Windows information, configuration editor and the registry editor, even a registry cleanup and a system policy editor, and then that internet connection configuration. I used to run that with the ISP I worked for early on, and that would be the Internet Explorer 3 and Internet Explorer 4, Internet Explorer 5, and that ended just about Internet Explorer 6 time frame of we were just taking it as the Internet Explorer that was coming on the scene at that time. I mean, we just went through a manual. We didn't have to go through a setup disk that we had to do for the earlier Internet Explorer versions. I even had to include a trumpet windsock and things like that in those early days. And if anybody is even familiar with that, give a shout out, because I remember that stuff. I remember what an issue was. Even had a customer's computer that would go onto our homepage of our company, and that would cause the video card driver that they had installed, and it was a VESA local bus actually, a video card, and probably pretty good. I think it was like a Cirrus Logic chipset. Not really a high-end adapter, but it would lock their system up when they'd go to our homepage. If they went to anyone else's homepage, they were fine. And the irony is if they went to our competitor's webpage, a competing ISP at that time, they were fine. So I set the customer to use our competitor's website as their homepage. That worked fine for them. The things that we went through had to do at that time. But Trumpet Windsock was an absolute horror of things at times too. The system monitor, and these are some of the things that are built into Windows. Yeah, see, loads the online documentation. When I look through this, I just didn't find anything. And it's got a help menu, and maybe that gets a little bit more information on the program. But I just didn't find anything relevant on the net nowadays. Even the ability to launch WordPad and Notepad. The disk cleanup. And as I say, these are built into Windows NT. Going through and being able to add different things in there for checking your performance. All the variables here on the processor. You even had the ability to do these remotely too back in the day. You could have another system on the network, and you could go through and these values, and it's a little bit like the oh gosh, my memory's faded out this late at night, but going through and being able to track the monitor the resources usage on a device on your network. And I'm sure I'll have somebody chime in and explain what I was referring to there. But these values are put out by that Windows at that time to be able to monitor the system. Here's all the all the areas you could go through and monitor. And you could add and have it, and there's the explanation of all those things. But going through and seeing how maybe you wrote a program and seeing how that loads down the system or anything like that. But that's getting into the territory of all the stuff that was built into Windows, and in some cases Windows NT. But I wanted to go through this program and just kind of show some of the stuff, and it gave me a good explanation for that century byte location again. And I did encounter that with somebody else today, and talking about the real-time clock and ordering a replacement real-time clock, that Dallas module, instead of modifying it, and really what to be aware of, because if you get a real-time clock chip that says it's Y2K fixed, it's not going to work in the PS2s, and now we learn in those clones of PS2s as well. So just something to be, the NCR followed IBM's lead, and they moved that century byte location on here as well. So But if you think this video has been informative and you liked it, click on that like button and please subscribe to my channel if you have not done so already. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.